It's exam review time. The AAA exam was yesterday, June 24 exam, and hot off the press, here's what came up, and here's what I thought of it, how hard it was. So watch on for all the detail. Well, I'm going to start off by being a bit smug. I am very smug about my exam tips. Pretty much everything I tipped came up. The only thing that came up that I tipped that didn't come up was critically evaluating an audit report. Everything else came up in the exam paper. There was a new style ROM question. There were some technical FR issues, although not as many as there have been in recent exam sittings. There were procedures for a specific assertion around the valuation of inventory. And that's the exact assertion and exact balance that I was tipping. Remarkable. There was a big quality management question. Very happy that came up because not only did I tip it, I put a big quality management question in my final mock, so my students were really well prepared for it. And there was a big acceptance question, and there was forecasting as well. I'm pretty happy with those tips. I do not have a crystal ball, but it turns out I do have quite a reliable gut. So, Section A of the exam, there were two variants of Section A. So you'll have got one of two questions. The first one that people reported to me, and lots of my students got this one, was all about a car dealership. And this seemed a fairly standard question to me. It had business risks. And the danger there was actually, there were so many business risks to go at in the scenario, you had to control yourself. There were only 10 marks available. You needed to find the 5 business risks where you were given lots of information about them. And there were lots of risks about this business, it being a franchise operation and it having multiple different locations that it doesn't directly manage. There were lots of business risks in there from what I'm told. But the danger was writing too much and running out of time. So you had to really control yourself. Pick 5, 4 or 5, 2 marks worth of content on each one. Then it was a standard risks of material misstatement question. Evaluate and prioritise the significant risks. And here, a lot of my students reported to me that they found many of the risks in the scenario weren't material. Now that could be because some students made an error in the materiality calculation. I can't tell you that for sure because I haven't seen the exam paper. So it could be that there was some sort of problem in their materiality calculation. Or it could be that the examiner had designed the question in that way. So actually, because it was 12 marks for ROMs, you get 3 marks for doing your materiality calculation. That leaves 9 marks remaining. And there are 3 marks per well-explained ROM. You only needed 3 ROMs to be able to answer this question properly. So you had to find 3 that were over the materiality threshold and talk about those. But if you found that you couldn't get anywhere near 3, there weren't any, there was only 1 that was over your materiality threshold, what I would have done in the exam there is I would have adjusted my materiality, right? And made it a level that actually made more of these risks material. That's me playing the exam game. I might have sacrificed a mark or so for my materiality calculation, but I would have made more of the risks material, and therefore I could have discussed more of them. It's not the right thing to do. Obviously, you should get your materiality calculation correct and pick out the genuinely material risks. But if you're sat there going, oh, I don't know what to do, well, you've always got to keep going in AAA. You know, the advice I give my students is you've got to be a shark. You've got to keep swimming. And a good way of keeping swimming there would have been to adjust your materiality level so that your risks became material. Now, part C here, this is something I tipped directly to come up, so I was very happy with it. You were told specifically inventory is a risk of material misstatement. Explain why. And then give procedures over the valuation of inventory. And if you're well prepared for that question, that should have been a home banker. And then the last question, not a standard ethics question. There was some ethics in it, but it was all about accepting an engagement to do some work on the company's sustainability metrics, its KPIs, as the audit firm, obviously giving you self-review threats, that sort of thing. Perhaps you haven't got professional competence in that area. Now, again, I was really happy to see this because I tipped acceptance, and I also said to my students, be all over sustainability because the examiner has just published a technical article on it. So I know that my students were well prepared for that one. Now, the second variant for section A of the exam, this one was a company called Bulbs. And, well, I was a little surprised to see one big audit risk question. We haven't seen that for quite a while. I'm a little bit annoyed at myself because I actually tipped this type of question to come up in March, and it didn't come up in March, and I really wish I'd said it had come up now for sure in June because it didn't come up in March. But anyway, that's life. So it was a big audit risk question, 25 marks. So you had to use loads of information from the scenario. And in this one, I understand you were given plenty of financial information. And the fact that it was audit risk, you had to watch out for detection risk issues, things that the auditor might overlook for a certain reason. And there was lots to go at in the scenario. There was a management bias indicator about there being a bonus, so you could use that to earn professional skepticism marks for judgment to add depth to some of your risks. There was an acquisition mid-year, there was a fire, there was lots going on, plenty of risks to go at. Then the audit procedures were all about the acquisition this company had made mid-year. Now, actually, there were audit risks you could talk about around that as well, around correctly accounting for it mid-year. Consolidation adjustments, that sort of thing, making sure you only bring in half of the year's financial performance of the subsidiary. But the procedures were specifically around goodwill, and a lot of marks for it, a lot. Right? So to make sure you got a decent number of those marks, you didn't just have to say what the procedure was, you had to explain how it gave you solid evidence over that goodwill balance. But lots to go at in the scenario, lots of facts for you to use and to verify. Then the third part here, the ethics question, this was all about auditors' responsibilities around laws and regulations. I'm told that there was some classic ethics stuff in here. The finance director had made a hush payment to somebody, right? So there was plenty to go at here, lots to use for 8 marks. Now, I think both of these Section A questions were fine. I wouldn't have minded either of them. But personally, I always like business risks. Right? I always feel like a well-prepared student can max out on marks in business risks. So I would have preferred to get the first one. But don't worry, whichever one you got, ACCA kind of make sure that the questions are of equivalent difficulty, and through the marking process, they make sure that things kind of even out. So you're not disadvantaged, whichever one of those 2 variants you got. Then into Section B of the exam. And in Section B, we're seeing the examiner following a pattern, where there's one question that really focuses on reporting and a second question that is on something else, non-reporting. So I'm going to go through the reporting questions first of all. And one variant, well, actually there were 2 variants, right, of the reporting question. One of them was a company called ANG or ANG. I don't know how you pronounce it really. And this started with just 4 marks that were actually about reporting. What's the impact on the audit report of the issues in the scenario? And that's easy marks, isn't it? You talk about the opinion. You discuss whether it's material and pervasive and the impact on the audit opinion. You then talk about the basis of opinion paragraph and any wider paragraphs that might be required too, right? 4 marks, easy. You would have had to control yourself because there's probably too much to do for 4 marks. The examiner often does that. Put something at the start of a question where you can overrun on time. And you see that a lot actually in this particular set of exam questions. Then it was all about a knowledge question. And again, this is something I tip to my students. And if you watched my exam tips video, you'll have seen me talking about this, that the examiner has said that they're going to continue including these pure knowledge questions. And this was another knowledge question on groups, just like in March 24. But this was about the group auditor setting materiality and the kind of impact that that has on the subsidiary audit. Only 4 marks. If you didn't know what to do, you try and find a few ideas from the scenario and then you move on. And then the third part of this question, slightly unusual, but I think a well-prepared student would have been fine with this, right? There were some problems with the materiality level that had been set. It wasn't right, it wasn't great. And you had to discuss them and discuss the impact of that. And again, there was lots of stuff in the scenario to go with here. So a well-prepared student should have been able to get enough from the scenario to be able to get up to a decent answer here. Now, the second reporting question, a company called Howells, this one all focused on going concern particularly, something the examiner really likes to test. So my understanding is you were given some forecast numbers, although I'm not 100% on that because I've had different information from different students. But I think you were given some detail about the company's forecasts that were supporting its going concern assumption. We were doing the audit here, right? We're not reviewing forecasts as part of some due diligence operation. It was forecasts that had been put together to support the going concern assumption. And you had to critically evaluate the assumptions that management had made in preparing those forecasts to support their going concern assumption. And then a kind of related question, part B, you had to discuss the impact on the audit report if they had correctly disclosed these going concern issues. Now, I don't know for sure, but I think it was, there would be no impact on the audit opinion because they'd done everything correctly, but we'd have a material uncertainty overgoing concern paragraph, MURGC paragraph, to highlight the going concern uncertainty. And to get to those 4 marks, you would have had to give some specific detail about what had to go into that MURGC paragraph. Like stating that the audit opinion is not modified in respect of this matter, like referring to management's correct disclosure of it in the financial statements, and a few details about the going concern issue as well. So it would have been easy to get 1 or 2 marks in part B. You'd have had to write some specific detail to get up to all 4. Then into the non-reporting questions in section B. And again, there were 2 of these. So there were only 2 variants of each question. That's a little bit unusual. We've normally seen 3 variants in the section B exam, section B of recent exams, but only 2 this time. Anyway, this one was called RENROS. And I was very happy to see this come up because it was a big quality management question where you were given loads of details about how this audit had been performed terribly. And your job was to explain how each of those details led to poor auditing. And I think you were given some guidance in the question that you should focus on planning, field work, the actual doing of the work, and the conclusions that were drawn in the question. And again, I'm a bit unsure if you were given that guidance or if that was something you had to draw out from the scenario. But there was a whole range of different issues, and a really nice way of structuring your answer would have been to put it into those kind of 3 categories. Because in a 20-mark question, you've got to have some structure in your answer to make life a little bit easier for the marker and also to help organise your thoughts a bit. So I was very happy to see this because A, I tipped it to come up, B, I put a question just like this in my final mock exam for my students, so my lot would have been really, really well prepared for this. Then the other non-reporting question was a company called Lupin. They were a bank, and I was a bit surprised here. Surprised to see a big 20-mark question that was all about acceptance. I have to say, when my students were reporting back that this came up, I almost didn't believe it. 20 marks on acceptance? Wow, we've never seen that before. The examiner likes to keep us on our toes. But I had tipped acceptance to come up. So I know that my students would have been really ready for an acceptance question, but they would have been expecting to see 8 marks, perhaps, rather than 20. But hey ho, you've got to just go with whatever the examiner asks you. And there were loads of things that you had to consider before deciding whether to accept this piece of work. You know, legal matters, professional matters, ethical matters, and lovely when you get this sort of discussion question coming up because you know there's gonna be a mark for having a conclusion that you justify based on the points in your answer. Yeah, so this, again, very happy to see it come up. So this is my smug face. And I'm feeling smug because so much of what I tipped came up. It doesn't always happen quite like that, right? I don't have a crystal ball. But I do spend my life with the AAA exam, right? That is my entire working life, is living and breathing this exam. So my gut is pretty reliable, but this time it turned out to be super reliable. So I was really happy that so much of what I tipped came up, and I've had loads of lovely messages from people thanking me for them. So thank you if you're one of those. And I'm also really happy with the mock exams that were on my course, because so many of the topics that came up were tested in my mocks. So not only would my students have seen questions that were like the ones in the real exam, they also would have got my really detailed feedback on their work to help them to improve. And after each of my mocks, each of my students gets a personalised voice note from me, taking them through their paper, giving them specific personalised advice to help them to improve. So I was super pleased that my mocks turned out to be very relevant for the real exam, because I know that that would have helped my students. So if you want my support for AAA going forward, I hope you don't need it, because hopefully you've passed the exam, right? But if you haven't and you need help for the next exam sitting, then I am here for you, right? But sign up early for my courses, because they do sell out. I have limited places because I do so much detailed marking and all those personalised voice notes. So WhatsApp me if you want to know more about my support.